For 2,200 years, every child in China, from commoner to aristocrat to the imperial princes themselves, has been taught the same story about China's first empire and Qin Shi Huang. He was a peerless conqueror who crushed 6 kingdoms to forge a mighty, unified empire. But he was also a merciless tyrant. He built the Great Wall and a colossal mausoleum, exhausting the strength of his people. He burned books and buried scholars, melted down weapons to cast bronze statues, believing that a populace without knowledge or arms could never rebel. But after his death, a treacherous courtier forged an imperial decree, murdering the rightful heir and placing an incompetent puppet on the throne. With a villain in control, the oppressed commoners, fearing execution or enslavement for violating the harsh laws, rose up in rebellion. In a remarkably short time, the entire empire responded, and the great Qin Dynasty crumbled to dust. The moral of this story is clear. No matter how great the ruler, he cannot abuse the power of his people. No matter how strong the empire, it cannot be built upon the suffering of the masses. Benevolence is the true path to kingship. The strict, ruthless laws of the legalists are but a superficial trick. But this isn't the true story. This is just the standard answer we are meant to remember.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to China Puzzle. I am ZYQ. With a flood of new archaeological discoveries, particularly the vast quantities of Qin Dynasty bamboo slips unearthed since 1975, historians now have access to incredibly detailed, first-hand information about the Qin system. As the work of deciphering these slips has progressed in the 21st century, the true picture of the Qin's collapse has gradually emerged from the depths. Let us now follow this mountain of ironclad evidence back to that age of extreme turmoil and uncover the secrets of a dynasty's rise and fall.
The history books are crystal clear on the fall of the first domino. 2 men, Chen Sheng and Wu Guang, were delayed by heavy rain while escorting conscripts. According to Qin law, they say, to miss a deadline by law is execution. Fearing death, they rebelled. But in the unearthed text of the Qin statutes on corvée labor, we see the actual regulations for being late. For a delay of 3 to 5 days, the punishment was merely a reprimand. For 6 to 10 days, a fine equivalent to the price of 1 shield. But the most crucial regulation is this. If the delay was caused by a natural disaster, such as rain, the service was waived. There was no punishment at all. So, a question arises. If the historical record is true, Chen Sheng and Wu Guang, as junior military officers within the Qin system, could not possibly have been ignorant of these laws. Why did they lie? Were they exploiting the information gap between the complex legal code and the illiterate peasants? Did they fabricate a lie to create absolute terror, forcing their 900 men into a corner with no way out, thereby igniting the flames of rebellion? And if the record is not true, why did later historians attribute the uprising to a fictitious, draconian law? Or let's put it another way. Why did the legal system itself become the object of such fear and condemnation? Chengxing's uprising occurred in September of 209 BC, exactly 1 year after the death of the Qin Shi Huang. Let's look at what happened in the imperial court during that year. The eunuch Zhao, a trusted confidant of the emperor and a man from a cadet branch of the Zhao royal family, conspired with the chancellor, Li Si. They forged an imperial decree making the younger son, Hu Hai, the new emperor. Using the pretense of the late emperor's will, they forced the eldest son, Fu Su, and his loyal general, Meng Tian, to commit suicide, thereby seizing control of the empire. Then the second emperor, Hu Hai, in an attempt to stabilize the realm, followed in his father's footsteps and embarked on an eastern inspection tour. Upon his return to the capital, Xianyang, he immediately set 2 plans in motion. First, he continued to conscript massive amounts of labor from the 6 conquered eastern states, under the pretext of building the Epang Palace and completing his father's mausoleum. Second, he mobilized 50,000 elite soldiers from across the empire to the capital and began stockpiling grain. This shows that Hu Hai was not the simple-minded fool portrayed in the history books. His tour had shown him the dangerous undercurrents swirling beneath the calm surface of the eastern territories. The old aristocrats, not yet eliminated, were stirring. A new war was on the horizon, and he was taking preventative measures. In the process, on the advice of Zhao Gao and Li Si, he made the laws more severe and executed his own siblings with brutal efficiency. The histories say he slaughtered all of them, but in fact, according to recent scholarship, he likely only killed the children of the first emperor, born to non-Qin mothers. Those who shared his pure Qin bloodline were merely demoted to commoners, eliminating them from the line of succession. Amidst this top-down, near-nationwide state of martial law and a white terror-like political purge, just 2 months later, the rebellion at Dazixiang erupted.
So, when we interpret this event in its historical context, we understand that whatever Chen Sheng's pretext was, it must have been a response to extreme pressure, and this pressure was not the normal state of the Qin Empire. It was a byproduct of the high-pressure situation created as the empire prepared for war. The legal system, highly distorted in its execution at this point, became a convenient scapegoat for later generations to attack Qin's rule of law. The next question then is, how did the empire respond to this uprising?
2,200 years ago, without modern communication, by the time news of the Chen Sheng and Wu Guang rebellion reached Xianyang, over a month had passed. And in that month, a single spark had become a wildfire. Not only had Chen Sheng established his own regime, calling himself the King of Greater Chu, but the old aristocrats of the Six Kingdoms had all risen in response. Suddenly, memorials pleading for help flew into Jianyang like snowflakes. In the palace, the second emperor convened a great debate on the future of the empire, and all the opinions fell into just 2 camps, the Feudalists and the Centralists. You have to imagine at this time, only 12 years had passed since the first emperor had unified the world. Before him, no one had ever truly ruled all under heaven as a single emperor. Even the state of Qin, in its nearly 700-year history, had never permanently controlled the lands east of the Hangu Pass. So, within the empire, there had long been a fierce debate on how to govern such a vast territory. The Centralists, led by Chancellor Li Si, were the legalists. They wanted to use the law to create a highly sophisticated state machine paired with an administrative system of commanderies and counties to effectively govern this unprecedentedly vast land and population. This, in fact, was the true weapon and secret to the first emperor's success. The Feudalists, led by other members of the imperial clan, argued that no matter how good the system was, it simply wasn't applicable to the entire world. They believed it was better to follow the old traditions, beat the eastern states into submission, and then let them govern themselves as long as they recognized the King of Qin as the Son of Heaven, the overlord of all. From a purely practical standpoint, considering the technology, financial development, and logistical difficulties of the time, directly administering the vast eastern territories was indeed a thankless task. The vast quantities of grain and cloth collected as taxes would rot or spoil long before they reached the capital, or the cost of transport would exceed their value. In return, the central government had to spend enormous resources to train and appoint officials for these regions and bear their administrative costs. From a purely fiscal perspective, 2,200 years ago, ruling such a massive territory with a centralized system was indeed an awkward, unprofitable situation. And the rebellion gave the feudalists the perfect "I told you so" moment. "We told you the East was a mess," they argued. "Your Majesty, look, these rabble just want to be kings of their own little patches of dirt. And those foolish aristocrats are already trying to restore their old kingdoms. Before long, the East will be a bloody free-for-all, just like it was for 800 years under the Zhou dynasty. Let us seal our borders, let them kill each other, and then we can step in at the end to clean up and reap the benefits. Isn't this the traditional policy our state of Qin has followed for 700 years? The Centralists, urged on by Li Si, submitted memorials arguing that this was not a time for economic calculations. This was a battle for the legitimacy of their rule, a fundamental struggle over the very nature of the imperial system. But the second emperor was not his father. Amidst the cacophony of arguments, he chose the one that sounded most pleasing to his ears. "These rabble are nothing but petty thieves and bandits. Let the local officials deal with them. Why must it trouble His Majesty?"
The feudalists had won. The central government made the bizarre decision to stand by and seal its borders amidst a rebellion that engulfed most of the country. It was eerily similar to the United States at the beginning of the two world wars, but America was watching wars on other continents. The Qin Empire was allowing its own limbs to rot and fester. Perhaps from that moment on, the second generation of the empire no longer had any concept of one family under heaven. As Chancellor, the only concession Li Si could win was to have his own son, Li Yu, dispatched to govern the most important granary in the east at Xingyang. He had preserved the empire's bridgehead for a future counterattack.
With the central nervous system of Xianyang having voluntarily severed control over its own limbs, the Qin Empire descended into a surreal political landscape. For the provincial governors in the east, this strategic abandonment was a death sentence. Imagine you were the magistrate of Pei County or the governor of Quaiji Commandery. When you see your territory engulfed in flames and your desperate pleas for reinforcements go unanswered, what do? Wait, that's a death sentence. Suppress the rebellion yourself? You don't have enough troops. For these Qin local officials, there was only one path left. To survive, they had to become rebels themselves. And this perfectly explains a mystery that has long puzzled historians. Why do we see so many officials from within the Qin system among the leaders of the anti-Qin rebellion? In Pei County, the Qin-appointed magistrate actually opened the city gates and tried to invite Liu Bang back to lead, hoping to trade his loyalty for a ticket on the new lifeboat. In Quaiji, the highest-ranking administrator of the entire commandery, Yin Tong, actually sought out Xiang Liang, the uncle of Xiang Yu, and tried to make him his general, with himself as the commander of a new rebel force. This wasn't the government forcing the people to rebel. This was the government forcing the government to rebel. It was the central government's isolationist policy that forced these cells, which were supposed to protect the empire, to metastasize, to seek self-preservation through cooperation with the rebels. The grassroots administrative system of the Qin Empire, due to the collapse of its top-level design, suffered a collective, systemic defection in just a few short months. However, just as the feudalists thought they could trade the chaos of the East for peace in their heartland, reality kicked them squarely in the teeth. In the winter of 208 BC, a general under Chen Sheng, leading a motley army of several 100,000 peasants, deserters, and convicts, simply strolled through the supposedly impassable Hangu Pass and charged all the way to the Xi River, just a few dozen kilometers from Xianyang. The Hangu Pass, where one man could hold off 10,000, had been Qin's security valve for centuries. Even at the height of the Warring States period, the combined armies of the Six Kingdoms had been stopped in their tracks before it. How could it be kicked open by a bunch of peasants who had just put down their hoes? This wasn't just a military defeat. It was a resounding slap in the face to the Second Emperor and the feudalists' isolationist policy. Huhai was utterly panicked. He discovered to his horror that the eastern barbarians he had dismissed as mere bandits had not, as Zhao Gao had promised, started killing each other. They were coming straight for his throne. In a state of profound shock and terror, the Second Emperor began to doubt. Could the feudalists have been wrong? And at this moment of existential crisis, a sidelined centralist seized his chance. The minister of the palace treasury, Zhang Han, stepped forward. This official, in charge of the imperial finances and construction projects, proposed an incredibly bold plan. Since the regular army could not be mobilized in time, they should pardon the 200,000 convicts working on the mausoleum at Mount Li, give them weapons, and turn these laborers into soldiers who would die to protect the empire. Huhai approved. For the Centralists, this was not just a military counterattack, it was a political comeback from the brink of oblivion. Zhang Han did not disappoint. He forged this mob into a fearsome army. In a single stroke, they crushed the peasant army that had entered the pass. They retreated. Zhang Han immediately asked the emperor, "Do we pursue?" To pursue meant to go east, to charge back into the chaotic lands of the Six Kingdoms. And how far should they go? Was it enough to just eliminate Sheng? Or should they fight to restore the glorious, unified Great Qin Empire? The emperor said, "Let us consider."
At this critical juncture, the feudalists panicked. They chose a fatal line of attack, the fall of the Hangu Pass. They raised a question: how exactly did those bandits just waltz in? An investigation was launched. The man the emperor appointed to lead it was his most trusted confidant, Zhao. What he didn't know was that Zhao was, through and through, a feudalist.
The victory at the Qi River was a shot of adrenaline for the terrified Emperor Huai. After a full month of hesitation, he finally made the decision that would seal the empire's fate. We fight back. He ordered Zhang Han to lead his newly blooded Mausoleum Legion east out of the Hangu Pass. Once unleashed, Zhang Han was a terrifying force of nature. He was like a combine harvester at full throttle, tearing across the ancient eastern plains. The armies of Wei were shattered. The relief forces of Qi were annihilated. The great general of Chu, Xiangliang, was killed in battle. The black banners of Qin once again flew over the banks of the Yellow River, and the man supporting Zhang Han's blitzkrieg, the man who secured his rear, was none other than the centralist Chancellor Li Si's own son, Li Yu, the governor of Sanchuan Commandery. Li Yu was like a nail, driven deep into the most critical strategic hub in the east, the Ao Granary at Xingyang. This was the breadbasket of the world. Through the canal system of the Yellow and Ji rivers, Li Yu continuously supplied Zhang Han's front lines with grain and weapons. It was a perfect iron triangle. Zhang Han killing on the front lines, Li Yu supplying from the rear, and Li Si strategizing in the capital. For a moment, it seemed the tide had turned. The invincible Qin Empire, it seemed, was truly back. As victory reports flooded into Xianyang, the mood in the city shifted from oppressive fear to manic euphoria. The path of great unification was once again proven to be correct, viable, and powerful. However, this dawn of a new imperial age was, in the eyes of the feudalists, a hellfire. This was the last thing they wanted to see. It was a cruel political paradox. The empire's victory was the feudalists' doom. Fear breeds madness. They had to break the empire's spine before Zhang Han was completely victorious. They couldn't defeat Zhang Han on the battlefield, but they could kill Li Si in the court. To survive, to seize power, the feudalists decided to do whatever it takes. Zhao, in charge of the investigation into the fall of the pass, posed two key questions to the emperor. Why was Chen Sheng's army able to march right through Sanchuan Commandery and straight to the Hangu Pass? Why could Li Yu defend the Ao Granary, but not the borders of his own commandery? Why? Zhao answered his own question. I have discovered that Chancellor Li Si and Chen Sheng's chancellor are from the same hometown. He is a traitor. There was nothing more to be said. The emperor, already turned against Li Si by Zhao previous machinations, ordered him thrown in prison. It is said that in his dark cell, the once all-powerful chancellor was tortured mercilessly. Whenever the emperor sent someone to verify the confession, Zhao men would beat Li Si until he confessed to treason. But when Zhao own interrogators came, any attempt by Li Si to defend himself was met with even more brutal torture. Trapped in this hopeless despair, Li Si's spirit was broken. He finally confessed to the crime, colluding with the enemy, with the intent to rebel. In 208 BC, on a public street in Xianyang, Li Si was cut in half at the waist. Just before his execution, he looked at his second son beside him and spoke his heartbreaking last words. I wish we could take our yellow dog and go out the east gate of our hometown to chase rabbits together again. Is it still possible? But the truth is not always so sentimental.
When historians have scoured all the records, they have found a deeply intriguing detail. Li Si had indeed written at length about his contributions to the empire. He had repeatedly denounced Zhao Gao as a usurper. But in all the written records, he never once directly denied the specific charge of exchanging letters with the rebel army. He only ever said, "I have merit." He never dared to say, "I didn't do it." This leaves a vast space for historical imagination. Perhaps in the brutal struggle between the feudalists and the centralists, the ones who were willing to do whatever it takes were not only on one side.
The execution of Li Si was not just the death of one man, it was the end of an era. With Li Si gone, the second emperor, Hu Hai, fell completely under the sway of Zhao Gao. He believed all the accusations of the chancellor's treason. Fear turned into a murderous rage. A great purge of the centralist faction swept through Xianyang. The right chancellor, Feng Kuji, and the general, Feng Ji, two pillars of the empire, were forced to commit suicide. And on the front lines, Li Yu, having lost his father's political protection and logistical support, was left isolated and helpless. He was killed in battle. The entire team of unification loyalists that Li Si had built was uprooted. The imperial court of Qin was suddenly empty, leaving only Zhao Gao and his shadow. Zhao Gao, having achieved his goal, became the new chancellor. With absolute power in his hands, he could finally implement his long-contemplated downgrade plan. He sent secret envoys to the 6 eastern kingdoms. The bargaining chip was simple. Qin was willing to abandon the great unified empire built by the first emperor and recognize their independence. They would all return to the state of the Warring States period, respecting each other's borders and redividing their spheres of influence. At this time, Zhang Han, on the front lines, caught wind of these developments. This brilliant general, fresh from a major victory at Dingtao, where he had killed the Chu commander Xiang Liang in a night raid, suddenly felt a bone-deep chill. He realized that his desperate fight on the front lines, in the eyes of the court, no longer had any military significance. It was merely a bargaining chip on a negotiating table. The court's strategy had changed, from pacifying the rebellion to using war to force a negotiation. Zhang Han no longer dared to advance east. To advance meant to expand the war, to defy Zhao Gao's will to contract. And so, after his great victory at Dingtao, with an overwhelmingly superior force, Zhang Han made a decision that has baffled military historians for centuries. He did not pursue the remnants of the Chu army. Instead, he turned north, crossed the Yellow River, and joined forces with Wang Li's Great Wall Legion to besiege the city of Julu in Zhao. Militarily, this was a move born of overconfidence. But politically, it was an act of coordination with Zhao Gao's negotiations. The Qin court hoped that Zhang Han and Wang Li would win a decisive victory in Zhao, inflicting enough pain on the feudal lords to secure a respectable exit deal for Qin, to keep their heartland and some territory, and to go back to being the king of Qin. However, man's plans are no match for the plans of heaven. Zhao Gao and Zhang Han had counted on the weakness of the feudal lords, but they had not counted on the madman, Xiang Yu. In Chu, Fanzeng and Xiang Yu killed the hesitant Song Yi and seized control of the army. They burned their boats and smashed their cauldrons, crossed the river, and shattered the iron wall of the Qin army at Julu. Wang Li was killed, and the Great Wall Legion was annihilated. The biggest bargaining chip on Qin's negotiating table had just turned to dust, and then came a fatal blow from behind. While all eyes were on the meat grinder at Julu, Liu Bang appeared silently in the south. In a surprise attack, he defeated the Qin general Yang Xiong, cutting off Zhang Han's line of communication with the Qin heartland. This meant that Zhang Han had not only lost his supplies, but his route of retreat was now blocked. At this moment, the second emperor, at Zhao Gao's urging, made the decision that broke the camel's back. Enraged by Yang Xiong's defeat, he had Yang Xiong executed and sent an envoy to severely reprimand Zhang Han. This decree broke Zhang Han's spirit completely. With Xiang Yu attacking from the front, Liu Bang blocking his rear, and Zhao Gao baying for his blood in the court, Zhang Han finally understood. As a relic of the Great Unification era, there was no place for him in Zhao Gao's new, smaller Qin. In 207 BC, at the ruins of Yin, Zhang Han surrendered with his 200,000 Qin soldiers. The military pillar of the Qin Empire had completely collapsed. Earlier, the king of Chu, on behalf of the allied lords, had made a famous political promise to the world, the Covenant of the King. He who first enters Guanzhong shall be its king. Later generations often see this as a foot race between Liu Bang and Xiang Yu, but in reality, it was a devastating act of psychological warfare waged against the Qin interior. The subtext of this covenant was, no matter who you are, whether you are a noble of the Six Kingdoms, a surrendered Qin general, or a Qin official, as long as you turn against your masters, kill the second emperor, and hand over the heartland, the feudal lords will recognize you as the king of Guanzhong. This was the true covenant of the king. It wasn't meant for Xiang Yu, it was a call to arms for the people of Qin. The effect of this poison pill was immediate. At Nanyang, a struggling Liu Bang received advice from his strategist, Zhang Liang. Zhang Liang saw the true nature of the covenant. He advised Liu Bang not to attack the city, but to relay the promise to its Qin commander. Surrender now, and you too can be a marquis, or even keep your post. The commander of Nanyang surrendered. Liu Bang had an epiphany. He marched on, holding the banner of the covenant high, no longer a conqueror, but an envoy of ennoblement. The Qin governors and magistrates defected one after another. Liu Bang's army swept through, almost without a fight, all the way to the Wu Pass. This poison pill was also delivered to Xianyang, to Zhao Gao himself. A secret envoy from Fan Zheng, the chief strategist of Chu, delivered the same message to Zhao Gao. If he could kill the second emperor, the allied lords were willing to recognize him as the new king of Qin. Zhao Gao was tempted. He would betray the second emperor, just as naturally as he had betrayed the first. He would trade the emperor's head for a ticket to become the king of Guanzhong. In September of 207 BC, the atmosphere in Xianyang was suffocating. The bad news kept coming. The emperor repeatedly blamed the feudalist faction and Zhao Gao. This was a fatal signal. Zhao Gao felt a terror he had never known. He knew that Hu Hai, for all his incompetence, would eventually wake up when the flames reached his own eyebrows. He would look for someone to blame for losing the empire, and that scapegoat could only be him. To survive, Zhao Gao had to strike first, but before he did, he needed one final confirmation. In this teetering court, how many men still recognized the emperor, and not him? And so, at a famous court assembly, Zhao Gao had a deer brought in. He pointed at the deer and said to the second emperor, "Your Majesty, I present you with a fine steed." The second emperor laughed, thinking Zhao Gao had gone mad. "Chancellor, are you mistaken? This is clearly a deer. How can you call it a horse?" Zhao Gao did not smile. He turned his cold gaze upon every minister in the court. "My esteemed lords," he asked, "tell me, is this a deer or is it a horse?" A deathly silence fell. Some ministers said nothing, for they dared not lie, but also dared not offend Zhao Gao. Some, with a final shred of loyalty to the Qin state, truthfully said it was a deer. But many more, those who had long since pledged their allegiance to Zhao Gao, unanimously declared it was a horse. The result was bloody. After the assembly, all the ministers who had said deer were secretly executed by Zhao Gao on various charges. Through this extreme stress test, Zhao Gao completed his final purge of the court. He now had absolute control. Even if he killed the emperor, no one would dare to say a word. The path to the coup was paved. And then, that very same month, the final death knell sounded. The Wu Pass, the last great gate to the Qin heartland, was breached by Liu Bang. When news that Liu Bang's army was on the Guanzhong plain reached Xianyang, the second emperor was utterly terrified. He could no longer deceive himself. He began to rage at Zhao Gao. "Didn't you say the eastern bandits were all defeated? Why are they at our doorstep?" Zhao Gao knew the moment had come. The emperor was now a liability, an obstacle to his negotiations with the eastern lords. Zhao Gao feigned illness and stopped attending court. Secretly, he summoned his son-in-law, the magistrate of Xianyang, and his brother, Zhao Cheng, and gave the order to assassinate the emperor. The Wangyi Palace, the imperial retreat the second emperor had used to escape the war, became his tomb. When the magistrate, Yan Lei, stormed the palace gates with over 1,000 soldiers and put a sword to the emperor's neck, the young ruler finally saw the cruel reality.
In his final moments, the second emperor displayed a desperate, pathetic will to live. He begged Yan Lei, "I no longer want to be emperor. Can I be the king of a single commandery?" Yan Lei shook his head. Then, a marquis of 10,000 households? Yan Lei refused again. "Then let me and my wife and children live as commoners, just like ordinary people. Surely that is acceptable?" Yan Lei looked at the man who had once owned the world and delivered the cold verdict. "I am here on the Chancellor's orders to execute you for the good of the realm. No matter what you say, I will not agree." In despair, the second emperor, Hu Hai, took his own sword and killed himself. It had been merely 3 years since the death of his father.
In September of 207 BC, with the blood still fresh at Wangyi Palace, Zhao Gao, wearing the imperial seal of the second emperor, strode into the grand hall of Xianyang Palace. In that moment, the man who had single-handedly orchestrated the empire's destruction was just one step away from the supreme position. He tried to sit on the dragon throne, even wanting the ministers to hail him as the new emperor. But he was met with a dead silence. The ministers, whether his sycophants or the few remaining old guard, all lowered their heads and said nothing. It is said that at that moment, the great hall itself began to tremble, as if the very beams of the palace were rejecting the usurper. Zhao Gao understood. He had killed all the direct descendants of the first emperor, but he still could not cross the chasm of bloodline. On the ruins of this vast empire, he was still just a lowly steward. To appease the court and to continue his downgrade plan, Zhao Gao was forced to compromise. He chose Ziying, the son of the first emperor's brother. But the title he gave Ziying was no longer emperor. At this moment, as a thorough feudalist, Zhao Gao finally spoke his true heart. The land of Qin was originally the state of Qin from the Warring States period. Now that the 6 kingdoms have been restored, the title of emperor is no longer appropriate. From this day forward, Ziying shall renounce the title of emperor and be known as the King of Qin. Pay close attention to this detail. This was not just a change of name, it was the official death certificate of the Qin Empire. It meant that the sacred, unified empire established by the first emperor was, in legal terms, officially dissolved. Qin had reverted to being one of the 7 warring states. Zhao Gao and the feudalists believed that by removing the crown and lowering their heads, they could earn the forgiveness of the Eastern lords. However, Ziying was not the puppet Zhao Gao had imagined. This member of the imperial clan, who had endured for years in obscurity, saw through Zhao Gao's endgame the moment he accepted the crown. He knew that Zhao Gao was only keeping him alive as a bargaining chip. The moment the negotiations broke down, or the moment Zhao Gao decided to make himself king, his fate would be worse than the second emperor's. To live, he had to kill Zhao Gao first. On the 5th day of his reign, Zhao Gao demanded that Ziying go to the ancestral temple to fast and announce his accession. It was an obvious trap. Zhao Gao planned to kill the new king in the shadows of the temple, just as he had killed the last. Ziying turned the tables. He feigned illness and refused to go. Zhao Gao grew impatient. The all-powerful chancellor made a fatal mistake. He went personally to Ziying's private quarters to urge him on. The moment Zhao Gao stepped through the door, history's judgment fell. Ziying's personal eunuch, lying in ambush, struck. There were no words, no trial, just a single, clean stroke. Zhao Gao, the man who had destroyed an empire, fell in a pool of his own blood. Ziying then ordered the extermination of Zhao Gao's entire clan. The people of Xianyang celebrated. The dark cloud that had hung over the state for 3 years had finally dispersed. The cancerous tumor had been removed. The new king of Qin, now in real control, made a last, desperate stand. He did not want to surrender. He mobilized the last remaining troops in the heartland and sent them to defend the southern gate, the Yao Pass. He was gambling that the Qin army, with the advantage of their home terrain, could hold off the eastern bandits one last time. But his opponent was no longer the peasant army of old. He was facing Liu Bang, now evolved into a top-tier politician, and Zhang Liang, a strategist of the highest order. Faced with the Qin defenses, Liu Bang adopted Zhang Liang's plan. He did not launch a frontal assault. First, he had flags planted all over the surrounding hills, creating the illusion of a massive, overwhelming army. Then, he sent envoys with heavy bribes to the Qin commanders. And in the moment of the Qin commanders' hesitation, Liu Bang launched a devastating surprise attack. At the Battle of Lantian, the last major force of the Qin army was completely routed. This was not just a military defeat, it was the collapse of public morale. The people of the Qin heartland, after 3 years of tyranny, war, and turmoil, were utterly exhausted. They no longer believed their king could protect them. In October of 207 BC, the king of Qin had been on the throne for a mere 46 days. Liu Bang's army was now camped at Bashang, just outside the walls of Xianyang. The end was near. Ziying understood. The mandate of the state of Qin was exhausted. To save the people of Xianyang from a massacre, to preserve the ancestral temples from being burned, the last ruler made his final choice. Outside the city by the side of the road, a cold autumn wind blew. A plain white carriage drawn by white horses approached slowly. The man in the carriage was not a majestic king, but a man dressed as a prisoner. A silk cord was tied around Ziying's neck, a symbol that his life was now as fragile as the cord, to be led away or strangled at the victor's will. In his hands, he held the imperial seal and the tiger tallies for commanding the army. He knelt by the side of the road. The moment Liu Bang accepted the imperial seal, the great empire founded by the first emperor, the empire once thought to last for 10,000 generations, officially came to an end. Qin had fallen.
But this was only the end of the Qin Empire, and it wasn't even the end for King Ziying and the state of Qin. Their end would come a month later, when Xiang Yu, burning with the fire of vengeance, stormed into Xianyang. He killed Ziying, massacred the city's inhabitants, and burned the Epang Palace to the ground. The fire raged for 3 months without being extinguished. Only then was the state of Qin, along with the family of the first emperor, finally reduced to ashes. And this was far from the end for the feudalists and the centralists. The struggle between these two ideologies would continue through several more brutal wars and decades of turmoil before the dust finally settled.